My name's Allison Gerber. I'm the editor of the Chattanooga Times Free Press, and I'm here today with Monty Bruell. Thanks for being with us today, Mr. Bruell. He's a candidate for mayor. And we're gonna jump right into questions and let you talk a little bit about why you're running for mayor, what qualifies you to take on this role, and if you're elected, what your highest priority would be.
Sure. Thank you, Allison, and thanks to the Times Free Press and WRCB for giving me this opportunity. As you said, my name is Monty Bruell, and I want to be the next mayor of Chattanooga. I believe that I'm one of the few candidates in this race who knows Chattanooga from both sides of the tracks, from every zip code. I grew up in Alton Park and East Chattanooga. I lived on Highland Avenue, just a few doors down from Union Grove Baptist Church. I lived in City View Apartments in East Chattanooga, up the hill from Memorial Hospital. And I lived in Eastdale, in Rollingwood, off of Wilcox Boulevard on Wandale Trail. But I'm also the guy who is Baylor School's first African-American graduate. And from Baylor, I went to Harvard, and I have a degree in economics from Harvard. After college, I spent several years working in Coca-Cola bottling, and I've worked for big corporations like Coca-Cola, Marriott, Unum, back when it was Provident, and Morgan Stanley. But for the last decade or so, I've been really involved in Chattanooga's startup community. I've been a mentor at the Company Lab, and I am a board member and shareholder in Rapid RMS, which is one of the companies that I mentored there, and that continues to thrive and do well today. So I think I have a varied business background, but I've always said that the real reason that I work is to support my volunteer habit. And so going back to the early 1990s, I was the board chair of Chattanooga Venture. Many people will remember Venture. It was a community goal setting and citizen engagement organization. We helped establish neighborhood associations all across Chattanooga, including a neighborhood association at the Harriet Tubman housing development. And I remember fondly working with Ann Wadley there to really create a neighborhood environment and to empower the residents of public housing to take control of their neighborhood and the quality of life there. This is a pivotal time in Chattanooga's history. We have had a wild year between the tornado, COVID-19, and just the pressures that everyone has been under. We need a different kind of mayor. Because the number one problem that has been exposed during this period are the vast income and wealth disparities that exist in our community. If you go all the way back to 1997, you will find that the average African-American household earned about 62% of what the average white household earned. And now you move forward to 2021, and you would think after all of this progress, after Chattanooga's being named the best outdoor city ever, the best mid-sized city, the most livable city, the best place to start a business, you would think that we would have erased that disparity. But no, here we sit in 2021 and pre-COVID, so I'm sure it's much worse now, the figure has dropped to 50%. The average African-American household today in Chattanooga earns half what the average white household earns. So I don't know why we would elect the same kind of mayor in this election. I don't know why we go back to central casting and we elect a downtown developer, or we elect the rich white guy, or we elect the protege of the current mayor. I don't know why we would do that, because those things have not worked for us in the past. And it is time for the average everyday citizen to stand up and take back their power. because they have tremendous power, and it's time that we all stood together and we demanded something different. So that is why I want to be the next mayor of Chattanooga, because I can bring that difference. I am the different candidate. And as I said, I know Chattanooga from every zip code, and I think that's what we need.
Thank you, Mr. Bruell. We're going to start out with questions about the city budget. The city's estimate is about $8 million in revenue due to the COVID-19 pandemic in the 2021 fiscal year. As mayor, how would you balance a difficult budget in the 2022 fiscal year or thereafter, also under the stress caused by COVID?
Let me say, first of all, that I believe that the basic, strong fundamentals of our economy that existed pre-COVID are still there. And once we can get everybody vaccinated and we can get this pandemic behind us, I believe that we will once again return to a robust and strong economy. But in order for all people, all Chattanoogans to participate in that recovery, I think we're going to have to do some things. We're going to have to support people. There are already small businesses that have gone under. There are people who have lost their jobs. And we just need to give everybody a pass because this pandemic was no one's fault. These bad things did not happen because people were reckless or irresponsible. So one of the things I want to do is I want to meet with our banks and our financial institutions and work out a plan so that everyone who has been harmed through no fault of their own can be given a second chance. So if you are a business and you went under and you've suffered terrible losses, well, I think we can find a path to recovery for you. If you are an individual or a family and your credit has been ruined and you've suffered hardship, well, I think that we can help you. How can we help? Well, first of all, I believe that the Biden administration and this new Congress will in fact provide more relief to cities across the country. And I think that we can use that relief to fuel our recovery. But even if that doesn't happen, we're sitting here in Chattanooga with a $70-something million rainy day fund. If a pandemic doesn't qualify as a rainy day, I don't know what does. So as mayor, I certainly would be willing to borrow from the rainy day fund to assist small business and to assist families in the recovery, because I think that's what we're going to have to do.
Thank you. So also related to COVID, as we near a year since the virus first came to Chattanooga, businesses and individuals here are struggling. How would you provide aid to businesses and families hit the hardest by the pandemic's economic impact? Are there programs currently in place that you would want to keep? And are there other programs you would want to add?
When you look at families in poverty, when you look at households in poverty, you will see that 2/3 of all households in poverty are headed by single women. And we have a 35% child poverty rate in Chattanooga. And again, these are figures that are pre-COVID. I'm sure that today they are much worse. So one of the things that we need to do, regardless of the pandemic, is we've got to come to the rescue of single moms and single dads, for that matter, too, their kids and families. That's where the poverty is. That's where the pain is. That's where it's always been. We just ripped the Band-Aid off of it during the past year to better expose it. But we've never had a mayor who said, I want to be the champion for single moms, their kids and families. And so that's who I want to be. That's the first thing that we have to do. Then related to that, we've got to prop up small business. We've spent a lot of time chasing Fortune 500 companies, and we've done a fairly good job at it. We have Volkswagen, we have Amazon here, but we put those companies out at Enterprise South. I mean, practically in Ottawa. We haven't created jobs in the inner city where people who need the jobs the most live. So we've got to do things to create jobs closer to the urban core. So that's why I want to recruit the 100 largest African-American owned companies, the 100 largest Latino owned companies, and the 100 largest women owned companies to Chattanooga. By traditional recruiting metrics, those are all deemed to be too small to be recruited. But can you imagine what it would do to the trajectory of East Chattanooga or Alton Park if we put a $250 million African-American owned company right smack dab in the heart of those communities? It would be a pretty spectacular thing. And then finally, as I've said, I think it's time to tap into the city's rainy day fund, because a pandemic should certainly qualify as a rainy day. And as mayor, I will borrow from that fund, of course, paying it back in the future, but I will borrow from that fund to take care of small business and to take care of families and people who have been hurt by this pandemic.
Thank you. So switching away from COVID, paving and transportation consistently rank at the top of residents' concerns according to annual studies by the city of Chattanooga. What transportation or infrastructure goals would you have if you're elected?
Let's take the general infrastructure topic first. Uh, I think that mayors across the United States have been kicking this can down the road because everyone has been hoping and expecting that Congress would pass an infrastructure bill. But the childish infighting and bickering has been so severe in Washington that the two sides have never been able to agree on an infrastructure budget. So I've got my fingers crossed, and I believe that finally, with the Biden administration in the White House and with Democrats in control of both houses of Congress, that we're going to see a pretty massive infrastructure bill passed by this upcoming Congress. That being said, I think that money's going to come to Chattanooga and we'll be able to pave a lot of roads, fix a lot of potholes, and take care of our truly crumbling infrastructure because that's something that we need to do. As a general transportation goal, one of my highest priorities is to give Chattanooga the very best public transportation of any mid-sized city in America. I want to reroute the system. I want CARTA to go places that people actually want it to go. And I want it to be a gem in this crown that is the city of Chattanooga. So, but most of all, I want CARTA to be free. We have huge poverty issues in Chattanooga. And if you're a person who rides CARTA one round trip a day, depending upon how you pay for that trip, if we make CARTA free, we're going to put between $600 and $1,000 directly in your pocket. By making CARTA free, we're going to allow people to have more affordable housing, to access better food, and to have transportation to go job hunting and to get to and from jobs. I think it's ridiculous that there are people who can't live their best lives because they don't have bus fare. That's crazy. So that's an easy fix because revenue from fares only covers 11% of CARTA's operating budget. It's not a heavy lift to make CARTA free. And that's going to be one of my first 100 days top priorities, is to accomplish that.
So how will you pay for that, the revenue lost from rider fees that are currently coming in?
So it's actually pretty easy. When we talk about 11% of CARTA's operating budget, we're talking about a $4 or $5 million number. When we eliminate fares, we immediately realize $1 million cost savings because we no longer have to buy the plastic fare cards. We don't have to lease the expensive SaaS software system that tracks the fare system. So that's a pretty good hit right there, just in cost savings. In Chattanooga, it costs $1 an hour to park at a meter downtown. That is the cheapest parking in America. We are spoiled. But suppose we raise that from $1 to $1.50 an hour. Well, guess what? We'd still have the cheapest parking in America. And that's what I'm prepared to do to make up the shortfall. And if you get a parking ticket here in Chattanooga at an expired meter, it's $11. I have friends who never pay to park because they say, when I get the occasional $11 ticket, I'll just pay it. And so I think we have to make that penalty a little higher. We've got to raise that to say $20 so that people are motivated to put money in the meters. And if they do get the parking ticket, we get a little extra revenue. And then the third way that I'm going to pay for this, one of the things that people mostly don't know is that CARTA nets almost $1 million a year from the incline. And that's because it's a tourist attraction. Very few Chattanoogans actually ride the incline on a regular basis. And that gives CARTA an additional $1 million a year. Well, Norfolk, Virginia has a water taxi system. It's really kind of a mini ferry that goes between Norfolk and Portsmouth, Virginia. They charge $4 for a one-way trip on that water taxi. Well, imagine if we had electric powered water taxis on the Tennessee River. We've got 20 miles of the Tennessee River flowing right through the middle of town. And I can see tourists paying, $5 certainly to ride anywhere between Moccasin Bend and Chickamauga Dam. So that's just yet another revenue stream that I envision creating for CARTA. When I talk about making CARTA free to ride and how we'll pay for it, I'm talking really about fourth grade math here. You don't have to be a rocket science to see how easy it is to do that. And so I am certainly committed to it.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to questions right now about businesses in the economy. The first one starts with an idea that Mayor Andy Burke had intended to implement before COVID happened, which is something that city labor unions and many activists support, and that is paying a $15 minimum wage to city employees. Do you support this or any other specific pay increase plans for city employees? And if you could explain why or why not.
Sure. I wholeheartedly support paying our city workers a minimum wage of at least $15 an hour. It is shameful that 40% of the people who work for the city of Chattanooga qualify for some kind of public assistance. Many city workers, and quite frankly, people who work in the mayor's office itself, have to work second jobs to make ends meet. That is an embarrassment, and we need to fix that. In particular, look at our starting firefighters. Our starting firefighters make under $11 an hour to do the work that they do. And as a result, we're having huge recruiting problems in our fire department. The fire department isn't properly staffed. So that is one area in particular where I know that we need to raise wages. And then finally, if I want to encourage other businesses to pay their workers a livable wage, as mayor of Chattanooga, I can't be a big old hypocrite and say it's okay for our workers to be paid minimum wage, but we want you to do better. No, I'm going to be the example. I am going to set the standard in this area, and I am going to pay our city employees a fair, livable wage, and that begins with a minimum wage of $15 an hour.
In Chattanooga, 40% about, and this number may be higher post-COVID, of households are housing cost burdened, meaning they pay more than 30% of their income for housing and may therefore struggle to afford other necessities. How would you address affordable housing as mayor of Chattanooga?
Well, the first thing is we need more affordable housing units. I believe that the city itself owns something like 88,000 acres in the city of Chattanooga, and much of that is vacant land or empty buildings that are not on the tax rolls. So I think that this is a great opportunity for us to create an urban land trust where we can put some of that land inside the trust and take the cost of the real estate, the land itself, out of the housing equation. That will then make the end housing product more affordable. That is just one thing that we absolutely need to do. The other thing that I want to do is when it comes to our pilots, our payments in lieu of taxes, we've given developers pilots and they have committed to producing a certain number of affordable housing units. I'm not sure that everyone has lived up to their word in this area. So we need to place an emphasis on I can't talk, pilot enforcement, and make sure that when someone says that they're going to give us affordable housing units, that they are actually going to do that. And then finally, let me say this about affordable housing. Because my degree is in economics, I believe that the most efficient way to make anything more affordable is to give consumers more money to spend on that good. So this goes back to our needing to pay our workers more. Chattanoogan's, when you compare us to cities in the region, we just don't make enough money. And so when we get those wages up, when we get household income up, it will have the effect of also making housing more affordable. The issue of affordability when it comes to housing, it's really not about doing 3, 4, or 5 things. It's more about doing 15, 20, or 25 things. There's so much that we can do, and we need to do all of those things at the same time.
Thank you. A number of Chattanoogans are experiencing homelessness. How would you further the city's efforts toward reducing homelessness as mayor?
Well, the first answer to homelessness is a home. So we've got to produce more housing options. We've got to have more shelters, shelters that accommodate families too. So that's the first way to do this. But the homelessness problem is a little deeper than that, because many people suffer homelessness because they have mental health issues or because they may have addiction. Um, we have to look at the root causes of some of our problems and not just keep slapping band-aids on these problems. So in addition to creating the number of shelter units and affordable housing units, we also have to increase mental health services, and we have to provide more social workers to help people who are on the brink of homelessness or who are already homeless. Uh, as mayor, that is certainly something that I will do.
Thank you for that answer. Downtown Chattanooga, which was once considered a showcase, other cities would come here and study how to revive a downtown, seems to be struggling these days to hold on to businesses. There's a lot of closed businesses right now. How can that be improved? And what factors do you think have made downtown less appealing to businesses? Also, when you answer this question, could you give us your opinion of the Business Improvement District and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing for downtown?
Well, let's start with the Business Improvement District. That's low-hanging fruit here. Uh, I think that in general, it is a bad idea to give private control over public space. I think that when our city council voted to enact the Business Improvement District, it was an admission of failure on the part of government. Our city council said, oh, we can't handle this. We can't do this. So let's just turn it over to this private business improvement district and let them take care of many of the services that the city of Chattanooga should be giving there. Next, what I would say about the BID is that the process was awful. It was the opposite of inclusive. The River City Company and Kim White, who's running for mayor, only solicited the opinions of landowners. They didn't talk to the small businesses who were the tenants in the businesses, I'm sorry, in the BID. And it's these small businesses who ultimately will pay the additional tax. And that's what it is. It's an additional tax. Uh, and they should have been involved in this process. Now, when business owners went to city council and quite frankly raised hell about the issue, that's when the River City Company suddenly had an epiphany and said, oh, we want to talk to the business owners too. Well, that train had already left the station. There wasn't anything those business owners could really do to affect how the BID was going to look. So we had this feudal, system where only wealthy landowners could participate and make decisions. And now, we have an organization that has been shamed, I think, into trying to do more of the right thing. But the original intent of the BID, as was expressed many times, was to, clean up downtown, move the homeless population out of downtown. The original intentions of this entity were not good at all. So let's address the general question about downtown and how we manage that. I think that there are two problems with downtown. We've made downtown about building buildings and not about people. And as a result, we have a lot of housing units that have been built where they have pretty low occupancy. The rents have been driven up because as a fallback position, developers and building owners have tried to convert those units to short-term vacation rentals. And that has had the effect of increasing the rents for all people. And so I think that was a horrible, horrible way to treat downtown. And then finally, let me say, I think downtown Chattanooga lacks a soul. It lacks a certain energy. It lacks a certain vitality. And I think that if we embrace the diversity of the people who live in Chattanooga, we embrace all of the cultures that are present here. I always use Chicago as an example. I love being in Chicago in the summertime. There are all kinds of festivals, both downtown and in neighborhoods, and people are just enjoying life and having a good time. And most of these things are free. It's not even about having the money to go and do it. If you want to, and you don't have a dollar in your pocket, you can just go sit in the middle of the crowd and have a great experience and have some fun. And that's the kind of soul that I think we need to give our downtown. And just remember that our downtown should be about people and culture, not just about building buildings.
Thank you. Last fall, shootings in Chattanooga were up from the same time in 2019 and higher than any time in the last 5 years. How would you as mayor work to lower violent crime rates in Chattanooga?
Well, I think this past year that we've been through has been pretty stressful, and it has had some pretty negative consequences. I think there's been an increase in gun violence, to be sure, but when people talk about gun violence, I think that we should define it. The number one cause of gun violence in America is suicide, followed by domestic violence. Gang violence is lower down on the list. And so I think that if we're going to talk about the harm that guns do in our society and do in our city, we've got to talk about how do we reduce suicide and how do we reduce domestic violence, because those are two serious problems as well. Now, when you look strictly at homicides, and when you look at the dangerous places to be in Chattanooga, yes, we have some gang turf wars that go on, but your average Chattanoogan never comes anywhere close to being a victim of that kind of violence. I think statistically, Hamilton Place Mall is one of the most dangerous places to be in Chattanooga. It's not downtown. It's not in the inner city. But when we talk about the crime that exists, we've got to look at the root causes. So if we have well, I started to say teenage boys, but I shouldn't leave girls out of this too. If we have teenagers who are idle, who don't have a rec center to go to, who can't stay after school and play sports or participate in other extracurricular activities, if we send those kids home with nothing to do and their parents are still at work, then they're going to make some bad decisions. If you look at the kids who are at the juvenile detention center on East 3rd Street, you will find that the majority of them were arrested between 3 o'clock in the afternoon and 7 o'clock in the evening. They were not out at midnight. They were not out at 2 in the morning. They simply were out of school, unsupervised, and they made bad choices. So going back to transportation, one of the things that free CARTA allows us to do is give kids alternative transportation to and from school. I also want to put bus stops at every middle school and every high school. So again, kids don't have to be held hostage to the 2:15 school bus home. They can stay longer at school, then they can take a 4 o'clock or a 5 o'clock bus home. And by that time, their parents are there. And I think there's going to be less opportunity for kids to get into trouble. I probably said that was going to be the last thing I was going to say. I've learned that as someone running for office, I often say that that's the last thing I'm going to say, and then I continue to talk. But the last thing that I will say is we need to get back to more community-based policing, where officers are there to de-escalate. They're there to provide assistance in neighborhoods. I think that the skill set that serves one well in Afghanistan in the military isn't the skill set that we need policing our neighborhoods. So I think that once we can change the way we hire and train police, and we can create new relationships between communities and the police, I think that will have a very positive impact on violent crime and crime in general. And that was the last thing I'm going to say about that.
So just to back up a minute, when you mentioned the buses at schools, are you talking about CARTA buses being there to bring the students home later?
I'm talking about having regular bus routes with bus stops that are at the schools. Currently, kids have to take the 2:15 yellow school bus home.
Right.
And if they miss it, then they don't have a ride home. I'm just making it easy for kids to stay after school for whatever reason, and then they can take a free and convenient CARTA bus home at the end of the day.
Okay, thanks. Activists spent this past summer protesting police brutality across the country, as well as here in Chattanooga, and demanding defunding or divesting from police departments. Would you consider either defunding or divesting from the Chattanooga Police Department or any other types of reform? And in what ways, if any, would you consider law enforcement reform?
So first of all, let me say that I fully supported the peaceful protest by the Black Lives Matter movement and by I Can't Breathe CHA and by other organizations that we had this summer. I am very frustrating, I know, to the activist community because they so want me to say I will defund the police. But I won't say that. And the reason I won't say it is because I want to radically change the way we address public safety. I want to transform policing in Chattanooga. And I don't know whether that requires less money or more money. If I commit to starting with a blank sheet of paper, bringing all of the community stakeholders together, and reimagining what it means to provide public safety in our community, then that may be a more expensive proposition. And so what I will say about policing and providing other resources is that I want to change the way we hire police. I want to change the way we train police. I want to change the way that police interact in our neighborhoods with our citizens. Um, and that may require a lot of money. When you say that I'm willing to start from scratch, that may be a higher number. And that includes hiring more mental health professionals, social workers, and other people who may not actually be under the auspices of the police department, but they are an integral part of public safety. And all of those things are going to cost money. So I'll say it for the 50th time. I am for totally transforming the way we police, changing our force from the militaristic occupying force that it is in our inner city neighborhoods. And I want to do something new, different, and better that we can all be happy about. And that's my commitment. I'm not going to commit to a budget number.
Many activists and some candidates for office have called for the removal of current high-ranking officers, including Chief David Roddy with the Chattanooga Police Department. What, if any, changes in the local police department's leadership would you implement if elected mayor?
I think it's bad for morale. It's bad for everybody. It sets a bad precedent when a candidate for office says, if you elect me, I will fire these people, because that really erodes trust and is a negative influence on the relationship here between the police department and the community. So what I would say relative to Chief Roddy and other high-ranking officers is that my intention is not to fire them. My intention is to be crystal clear about the changes I want to make in the department and how I want that department to be run. And it will be up to Chief Roddy and anyone else in leadership to decide whether they can be leaders in that kind of department. And then if they can't be, then I would, accept their resignations and we could both move on from there. But I think coming into office saying, one of the things on my to-do list is to fire this particular person, I think that's just not the way to go. And we're all entitled to due process. And I would want to sit down with Chief Roddy and see if he can be the police chief that I want him to be. And we can reach a mutual decision.
Many have questioned the conduct of activists, citing incidents of vandalism, disruption to businesses, and some confrontations with police. Others have criticized law enforcement for restricting access to public areas, surveillance of activists on private property, and the nature of some arrests that occurred during the protests. If similar unrest occurred during your term as mayor, how would you weigh the restrictions for both activists and police presence? And what would you do differently?
I think it's important to make two distinctions here. First is a distinction between the Chattanooga Police Department and the Hamilton County Sheriff's Department. I think most of the most atrocious and reprehensible behaviors on the part of law enforcement during the protest occurred because of things that the Hamilton County Sheriff's Department did. I just don't know what leadership of the Sheriff's Department is thinking, because you couldn't be as wrong as many times as they've been wrong just by accident. There's got to be a real policy and leadership problem at the sheriff's office for them to have done the things that they've done. So I don't want Chattanooga police officers to be held responsible for things that the Hamilton County Sheriff's Department did. The next point that I think is important to make is that for the most part, I think the protesters themselves were peaceful. I think most of the violence, most of the acts of vandalism came from outside agitators who were wanting to make it appear that the protesters were doing these things when they actually weren't doing it. So I commend Chattanooga protesters because I think they were for the most part, I'd say 99% of them were peaceful and behaved in a way that we would want protesters to behave. So I think the problem was with outside people, neo-Nazis, anarchists, people who really wanted to take advantage of the situation and shine a bad light that was undeserved on the protesters. Now, how would I deal with this in the future? Um, we all have a First Amendment right, for freedom of speech, and I certainly am not wanting to in any way suppress that. I think the most important thing when you're dealing with a protest is to preserve public safety for the protesters and public safety for citizens who may not want to be involved in the protest. So I think the number one difference that I would bring to this equation is that I would sit down and I would have law enforcement sit down with protesters, and we would map out a strategy. I would hope that the protesters would say, okay, today or this evening or tonight, this is what we want to do. And then, government and the police force would say, all right, well, we're fine with you doing these things. We wish you wouldn't do these other things over here. But let's work together. And if we're working together and we have communication on a daily basis, I think that we can keep everybody safe. The issue isn't to suppress protests. The issue is to be able to do it in a way that has integrity and provides safety for everyone involved.
Switching away from policing for a minute, have you received a COVID-19 vaccination? And if not, will you take one when it's available to you?
I have not received a COVID-19 vaccination because my group has not been called yet. But the very second that I am approved to go and get vaccinated, I absolutely will go and do it.
Do you believe transparency is important in the mayor's office? And if so, how will you ensure that, and how will you continue it throughout your term? Will you grant interviews to reporters and answer their questions on a regular basis as well?
Well, the two cornerstones, I think, of good government are transparency and accountability. We need to have both of those things. So I will bring transparency and accountability to the mayor's office by doing a few things. One is I will create a mayor's citizen advisory council, and I will meet with this group monthly. And that group will be comprised of a diverse group of citizens from all across our city. And I will depend on them to tell me the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I will seek their counsel. I will truly ask for their advice. I I would hope to maintain the relationship with the media that I currently have. I'm an open person, and I think that it's very important that the media have free and easy access to elected officials, and that would include me as mayor. So yes, and I want to do things like go on call-in radio talk shows and have people express their opinion to me, and then finally, I go to a lot of city council meetings, and I have never seen Mayor Burke at a city council meeting. Never, not one. Now, someone may say, "Oh, well, he was there on June 25th, and I missed that," but he does not really have a warm and cordial relationship, I believe, with city council. So one of the things that I want to do is to attend at least one city council meeting every month. And I want to publicly take questions from council members, and I want members of the public to be able to question me. And I will stand there long into the night if that's what is required, because I believe that citizens should not only have the right to come up and tell you that you're doing a great job, they should have the right to come up and tell you you're doing a lousy job. And if you want to be mayor, you can't be tone deaf. You can't just isolate yourself and hide in your office at City Hall and just pretend everything is fine and not allow people to come and give you their opinions. So I think I'm going to be the most transparent, accountable, and accessible mayor in the history of Chattanooga.
So you kind of just answered the next question, which was, but I don't know if you may want to expand on it. So I'll say the question anyhow. What should the relationship between the mayor and the city council look like? And will you cultivate relationships with council members?
So we have what is called a strong mayor form of government. There are many things where the mayor doesn't really need to consult city council. And so the current administration doesn't consult city council. The mayor sets the budget. The city council can approve it, they can reject it, but they cannot change it. And so that gives the mayor immense power. It matters who the mayor is because that budget is a reflection of the mayor's values and priorities. One of the ways that the mayor minimizes the powers of city council is by not giving them enough staff. I think that being a member of city council is a tough job. And as mayor, I will put in the budget enough money so that staff can be hired for council, so that issues can be properly researched, and that it's not falling on individual council people to just spend so much of their own time and energy to get things done. As I said, I want to attend at least one city council meeting every month, and I want council to have the opportunity to publicly question me. And I want them to be able to tell me what they think I've done right and what they think I've done wrong. I want to have a very close relationship with city council, and I think that's something that we haven't had here in a number of years.
Our final question is, would you support money for a new Chattanooga Lookouts stadium? If the request is made at some point for public money to help support a new stadium.
So I think that this is one of those cases where you have to use the but-for test. Like this wouldn't get done but for the involvement of public dollars. I don't think that that we should just say, without doing any kind of analysis, without any kind of negotiation, that yes, the city will build a new stadium, or yes, the city will provide public monies for that stadium. The city should not provide dollars for something that's going to get done anyway. I think it would be a great thing to have a new stadium. I support the Chattanooga Lookouts, and I want to keep them here. And so I will do whatever makes sense as the mayor of Chattanooga to be a good partner to the Lookouts and to keep minor league baseball here in our community. But I will not offer a blank check. I will provide support. I will provide partnership. But I think it would be wrong, and it would not be, I would not be a good steward of taxpayer dollars if I said, oh, you get a stadium, you get a stadium, you get a stadium. No, that's not how this should be done. We should be thoughtful, deliberate, and transparent, and then ultimately accountable for the way that we spend taxpayer dollars. And that includes in providing venues like stadiums.
Mr. Bruell, thank you so much for answering these questions and taking time to be here with us today. Is there anything that you would like to say in closing?
Well, I think the only thing that I want to say is that historically, we've had really poor voter turnout in our city elections. Out of something like 103,000 registered voters last time, only 19,000 people voted, and Mayor Burke won with just 11,000 votes. I want to see every registered voter vote for the candidate of their choice, and I hope I am the candidate of their choice. But we've got to have full participation, because that is truly how we're going to return power to the people, is by having everyone express their preference by going to the polls and voting. And remember, vote for Monty Bruell for mayor. And with that, thank you again for giving me this opportunity. I've enjoyed answering your questions, and look forward as mayor to always being available and accessible, and continuing this conversation.